now we're going to be talking about Vagrant. So what is Vagrant and why do we need it? Why do we need this extra layer on top of VirtualBox? Well, let's take a step back. Let's fire up VirtualBox. Let's fire up that VM of ours that we had running a few minutes ago. And let's understand the problem first. Okay, so we have the machine. I've got our box up and running. We can see its network configuration there. It's on my network. We can ping it. We can do things like, let's do this. Let's go into a file explorer. Let's go to local disk. Let's go to Windows System 32 drivers etc hosts. I don't have Notepad. Okay, actually, let's install Notepad++. This is an amazing little Notepad editor. We may as well just do it now because we're going to be needing it later on anyway. Okay, I've just accepted the defaults all the way through. Okay, right, let's get rid of that. Let's go back to our System 32 directory, drivers, etc, and let's edit this hosts file. So I can go and I can say 192.168.100.7, which is the IP address of that VM, points to CentOS.local. Okay. Finger problems. There we go. Okay. That's why I like Notepad. It's smart. Alright, so let's open this command prompt and let's say ping CentOS.local. Okay, great. So we've got this machine acting as a proper DNS type resolving box. But here's the problem. Let's have a look at this machine now. Let's say which HTTPD, in other words, which HTTP daemon are you running? And it has none. And if we say which PHP version have you got, it has none. And that's the problem. So although we can download these pre-built images or we can create images from installation media, they are vanilla images. In order to get this CentOS machine to be a web server, I'd need to go and use a package manager like Yum to go and pull the, let's say, Apache or whatever web server I want to run. And I'd have to do the same thing with PHP and if I was running a database, etc., etc. So you can already see the problem. And that's the problem that Vagrant solves. What Vagrant does is it creates this ability for us to include provisioning with the machine image. And what provisioning does is it automatically sets up the automatic inclusion of pre-built aspects of the box pre-configured. So we can tell it that we want the box to have a particular IP address, we want it to have so much RAM, we want it to have PHP 5.6 installed, etc., etc. So that's one of the things that Vagrant does. The other thing that Vagrant does is that it creates this disintermediary layer between VM providers. Now let me explain that. I'm running Oracle VirtualBox here, and that's what we are using. But some chap, part of the development team down the road, he could be running VMware as his virtual machine provider. Now, right there we have an issue. So I may have to go ahead and build now a VirtualBox version of my VM image, and he would have to go and build a VMware version of the image. So what Vagrant does is Vagrant says, well, I don't really care who the VM provider is. I provide you with a driver for VirtualBox, and I give you a driver for VMware, etc., etc. So we now create a single image. And that's the power of Vagrant. That's why we have to have this extra layer that Vagrant brings to the table on top of the actual core VirtualBox that we have running. And there's one final thing that Vagrant also brings to the table, which is the ability to create complete standardization. And what I mean by complete standardization is that because of its provisioning capability, we can now turn around and say, okay, our development team is going to be running Ubuntu with PHP 5.6, with X web server and Y this, etc., etc. And we include that in the provisioning file, and that's what we then distribute to all the members of the team. And that's how we can create consistency in terms of the environment or the VM environment that each of the team members is using from a VM perspective. Okay, so let's shut this guy down. And while he's doing that, let's exit here. Let's go here and let's install Vagrant. And just before we do that, we can go and say Vagrant. And Vagrant can be found at Vagrant up, and just go to the download section and download the Windows build. Okay, so yeah, that's gone. Right, let's go in here. Okay, let's fire up the Vagrant install. Now, just a quick word on the pathing here. Don't be a good Windows citizen and try and go and change this to C:\program files, blah, blah. Vagrant's based on Ruby, and Ruby has a known issue with spaces in pathing. So leave it exactly like that and just let it do its thing. So it's going to sit and churn, and once it's done, we'll have Vagrant installed. Okay, and it's going to ask us for a reboot. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down, and when I come back, we'll carry on with looking at Vagrant. Okay, so we're back after the reboot. Let's take a look at what Vagrant's done on the disk. So let's go to our HashiCorp directory, and there you can see it's created a Vagrant directory. And actually, let me dig in here and show you something. Let's go into Gems. Let's go all the way down into Vagrant 174. Let's go into plugins, providers, VirtualBox, driver, and there you can see that's the actual driver file for Oracle VirtualBox. Now, if we step up a little bit higher, you can see there's the Hyper-V and the Docker and so on and so forth. And so that's how it creates this abstraction layer between the VM providers. Also, I guess, to reinforce how we can create this standardization, let's just fire up old Firefox and let's go to Protobox. So Protobox allows us to create Vagrant pre-builds. For example, I can say we want to create a Laravel build, and we want to give it that name, and we want to do, excuse me, let me just go back. We want to have it running on Ubuntu 10, and we want these packages installed, and we want to be running these Apache modules, and we want PHP 5.3, whatever, you get the idea. I'm not going to do the whole thing. But that's how we can create this standardized build process. Anyway, be that as it may. So it's done that. Let's have a look in our home directory. You can see it hasn't done anything here, but all of that's going to change when we get to popping Homestead into the mix, which is what we're going to be doing next. But for the moment, that's all that we need to be concerned about as far as Vagrant goes. You'll also notice that it hasn't created any icon or anything like that on the desktop. And that's because Vagrant is purely a command line tool. So let's call it quits here on this section. We're now done with Vagrant. We understand that it's creating this intermediary layer for us. We understand that it's creating provisioning, and it gives us standardization of images across development teams, and we've seen how we can build those images. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to pull in the Laravel Homestead box and start getting to the meat of the matter.